Winsome Sears, the new Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Great to see you. Thank you so much for coming in, Lieutenant Governor. I appreciate you being here. And Semper Fi to you, I must say, as the father of a Marine who, by the way, my stepson came here when he was 7 years old from Nicaragua, became a Marine at the age of 19. I think that pretty much follows your life, doesn't it?
I tell you, it's the immigrant story, and it's been happening for a very, very long time now. And it's just an amazing story that it's still happening and people are still seeing that American dream come to fruition. Well,
your life really is the embodiment of the American dream. And it, according to the rules of the woke culture, it's impossible. It's impossible for an immigrant of color to come to America and succeed. But you did the impossible, or perhaps it's just that notion that it is impossible that's the real problem here.
I don't think it's impossible at all. I mean, the opportunities are here. If you take advantage of them, then you'll do just fine. I understand that there are problems, there are obstacles, there are all kinds of things. But remember now, I spoke the language, just with a different accent, a Jamaican accent. So, that's one thing. But there are people who come to America who don't even speak the language. They speak something else. And they start from the very bottom. And yet they succeed. So the opportunities are here if we take advantage of them. Not making light of the problems that people face.
Now, your governor and you in particular are involved now in this transition of Virginia from what it was, a kind of a woke administration, to something that more directly addresses the needs and the desires of the voters that put you in office. What is your biggest impediment right now to turning that culture around?
Well, I think, when you have media, for example, that seems to just kind of take a set on you and trying to let people know there is no such thing as CRT, when, as we have the receipts, as people like to say on the street, we have the receipts. For example, we have proof that Loudoun County Public Schools did hire people to teach about critical race theory. I'm talking in really high amounts, $120,000 for equity consultants to do systemic assessments, $32,000 to teach specifically about CRT, $40,000 to talk about equity-driven leadership, and there's more. But we're not even, we're just going to move with what we have in front of us, and that's the governor wants to create lab schools. He wants to continue that. There's a university I know mentioned the other day that they had lab schools that would help children economically disadvantaged, especially. It was doing fine. Successful kids. The next governor that came in, who was a Democrat, shut it down. Why would you do that? Why would you try to hamper disadvantaged children, who most of them were black, from being successful so that we could start creating generational wealth? So we're moving along, and we're going to do it because the parents want this. That's why they elected us.
Now, Lieutenant Governor, the parents want it, but of course, a lot of the teachers' unions don't. A lot of the media don't. Perhaps 90% of the media is against you. Is the support of the voters enough? What are you going to need extra in order to, because we know that the teachers union is empowered with enormous amounts of money, particularly after all these COVID relief bills. They have a lot of political power still, and the media, of course, does have an effect on public opinion. But are you confident that you can carry out the transition?
Well, we have a coalition of historically black colleges and universities who are saying, we want this. We want to help children. In fact, many times in the past, when black children were denied the education that they needed, it was the HBCUs, as we call them, who stepped in and said, our children are going to learn. Furthermore, we have parents who are taking advantage of a tax credit scholarship it's through Educational Foundation, but it helps more economically disadvantaged children to go to schools that are not public schools, they're private schools, and they're thriving. And we need that to continue. We have also, we've been talking with parents, we've been talking with businesses who want to help. So we've got a coalition going, And we are challenging those politicians who, by the way, they have the ability to send their children, because they have the
Absolutely.
resources, to send their children to private schools. Why would you stand in the doorway and block poor parents who want their children to make school choices? Why would you stand in their way and say, no, you must go to this school and this
Right.
school only? You know, for me, that's the new red line. Your zip code, once again, is the red line on the kind of education you're going to get.
You know, that's another reason why I think you all were elected, is because the hypocrisy of those in power just got to be so transparent, not only in terms of education, in terms of crime. You see a lot of people who are defunding the police who have private police escorts themselves in Congress. In terms of the pandemic, you see people who are not obeying the rules that they force other people to obey with regard to masking, et cetera. How much of that has had to do with your win as well, and how much of that has to do with turning America around from the woke culture?
Well, there is a real awakening happening, and it's happening in the immigrant community. It's happening in the Black community. Latinos, especially, you see, are really seeking to really embrace the Republican ideals, the conservative ideals, because you can see what's happening, for example, in Florida with school choice. The charter schools going gangbusters. It's working there. People want choice. And we're going to have that in Virginia. That's what the people voted for. We didn't hide what we stood for, not the governor, not myself, not Jason Miyares, our attorney general. And by the way, we won the House back. There is something in that to say we want change, we want things differently. I got to tell you, I went to a school, a middle school, in a very poor neighborhood. It's in a Black neighborhood. And the school is beautiful, but the principal tells me that the children were 2 years behind in their reading grade, and COVID hit, and because they stayed home, they're another 2 years behind. That's 4 years. What are we going to do? So the issue isn't that you have a problem with me being a Black Republican. The problem is our children are not learning. I don't know what about that they're not getting. You, politician, you have the opportunity to send your child to whatever school you want because you have the means to do so. And by the way, the wealthy, they already have that choice. So it's not as if we're taking money away. What we're saying is, don't stand in the way of parents who have begged me as I was on the campaign trail. Why can't we send our children to whatever school we want? That's what we're talking about. The future of the child.
Lieutenant Governor, there's another issue that we started with, which is crime, which is hitting cities all over the country, particularly those run by woke Democrats who have these new bail policies and such that let violent criminals out practically the same day that, very often the same day that they're actually arrested. We just had this tragic shooting last week, killed 2 police officers here in New York. And then we just had a perpetrator who had shot a policeman here in New York, who was just released on $15,000 bail a week after he shot a police officer. Is that an issue that you were trying to address? I know one of the 11 executive orders that the governor came out with had to do with dismissing the parole board and replacing them. Was that because they were too woke?
You know, I don't even know where to begin with this, because once again, coming back to that school, sometimes the children have to walk over dead bodies, I'm told, in order to get to school. You hear gunfire all the time. One of the children, when I was talking with them, he looked so forlorn, and I just said to him, to the class, what gives you joy in the morning? And you know what he said? He's a 6th grader. He said, that I live to see another day.
Oh, my goodness.
My God.
Wow.
What is this child experiencing? That's what a child would say in a war zone.
Yeah.
That's what a 70-year-old might say after having lived, not a 6-year-old. So we've got to clean up these neighborhoods. And by the way, when the criminals are let free, they go right back into that community. And is it any wonder then that the people who live in those communities are afraid? They're afraid to talk to the police because, you know, there is a saying on the street, snitches get stitches. And people want to be safe. And so the crime continues. And we have woke people letting the criminals out. You know, the criminals aren't going to those folks' neighborhoods. No, because they have security systems, or they live in gated communities, or they're just pretty safe neighborhoods. You know, help the people who you claim to help and to love more than anybody else.
Lieutenant Governor, the final question is on the pandemic because, of course, it took a tremendous human toll, but it also empowered a lot of politicians to take more control than they otherwise would have. How difficult is it going to be to dismantle those new levers of power that the politicians are so happy to move up and down?
Well, you know, I preside over the Senate every day. And we have senators who are continually being out because they've been hit by COVID. These folks have been vaccinated, they've been boosted, and yet they have COVID. But here's the other thing. In committees, when they're in their committees, they sit shoulder to shoulder with each other, but then they come into the Senate proper, and there are these cages that they sit in. And so I'm wondering, does COVID not hit in the committees? It just hits when you're in the Senate, on the Senate floor. It doesn't make any sense. And then I'm trying to talk with them. I can't understand them. Sometimes they can't understand me. I can't see them to call on them. It's just ridiculous. But we're going to get some semblance of realness, reality back, and common sense. It's just got to stop. It's going to come to a head pretty soon.
And your experience in the Marine Corps, I'm sure, will help in overcoming those situations, no?
Yes, it's called leadership. It's called you have to adjust and adapt. And that's what you have to do, because COVID is going to be with us in some form or fashion, and we're not going to keep shutting down. Our children are suffering. Our economy is suffering. You see what's happening on the international scene. They're not shutting down. No, they're going like gangbusters, these other countries. We're not doing it.
Well, you're a breath of fresh air, I got to tell you, and we hope that the revolution that's taking place in Virginia that you're a part of spreads throughout the country as well, because we really need it. Winsome Sears, Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, great to see you. Please come back and see us again. I appreciate it.